that she came across a book called Ulysses, and all the book dealers around her were laughing. It's a first edition James Joyce Ulysses in English. You sold that book so underpriced. Still got a bit of fire left, which is nice. 7:30. I'm going to rest a bit longer. I don't know if it's warm enough, but I might just sleep in front of the fire. I have to keep... Tonight the fire is not in front of my tent because of the wind direction. It wasn't really favourable and I didn't really set up perfectly correct. But there's a nice bit of grass here and the fire is quite warm and I've got wood next to me. So I might just see if I can sleep here on the grass. I'll probably end up crawling into my sleeping bag at a certain point, but you know, like people used to when they were traveling, they would just lie down and fall asleep on the ground where they were. Soldiers, travelers, journeymen. Let's have a go at lying on my little satchel, sleeping under the stars. Libraire. Libraire, c'est
Librairie.
Librairie.
Ouais.
Histoire de musique aussi. Qu'est-ce que tu fais ici?
Je reconstitue les angles.
Les ongles, les corners.
Ouais.
Les ongles.
Avec de la poudre de cuir. Là, je gratte.
Oui.
Je fais comme ça.
Pour présenter très bien
ça.
les...
Voilà, je récupère de la poussière de cuir.
Ouais.
Ensuite, je mélange avec de la colle.
La
de
colle.
la cire.
La colle, pourquoi?
Pour que ça adhère à l'angle.
Pour
adhérer. Oui, pour
oui.
que ça adhère. Ouais. Voilà. Voilà.
Goodbye to my
Goodbye.
lovely friend Ariam for hosting
À très
me.
bientôt. Oui.
Yeah, à bientôt. I will return.
Yeah.
So I just spent the most pleasant afternoon. I went into the bookstore here in Beaumont And the lady who ran it was this Parisian lady. Well, at least she lived in Paris almost all her life, and she'd moved here about a year ago, and she brought her business with her. Now she sells antique books. She's in the high market. She has clientele all around the world. You go into that bookshop, you're surrounded by library-bound tomes, collections of Voltaire, encyclopedias, complete works of Baudelaire, Victor Hugo, and then all the other little nitty-gritty stuff, you know, in the literary world. And I asked her to, oh, do you have a book of Baudelaire that a small book of Baudelaire I can buy? And I ended up with Lamartine, chosen works of Lamartine, poésie. Voilà ce chêne solitaire, dont le rocher s'est couronné, parlait à ce tronc séculaire, demandant comment il est né. Lamartine. Lamartine et son assalto. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 mattina es el asunto. De l'enviseur. I should go back to French, which is good. I wanted Baudelaire, but this, I had a little read and it was good. Anyway, what ended up happening, I said, you know, I noticed she sits around this table in the center of the bookshop, and there's an ashtray in the middle. I didn't even realize the room was smelling like smoke, probably because I had a few cigarettes at the bar. And I said, oh, you know, because I had talking with this lady and she was very fascinating. I said, oh, can I just sit with you and talk with you for a bit? So we sat down and we lit a cigarette. She brought me a coffee and we were talking, and she was so interesting. And then she's like, oh, you know, do you want to have lunch with us? And so her nephew was staying with her, and we had lunch. What then developed was that we just sat around the table for hours, 5 hours maybe, drinking wine, smoking cigarettes. And bearing in mind the kitchen is just behind the shop, and so she just closes the shop, and then her friend comes, and then this young intelligent chap who's 18 years old, who frequents the shop, he comes and sits down with us. So, and the lady was called Ariane, and so I was joking to Ariane, it's like, oh, it's your salon, because in Paris, in the good old days, they had salons where you'd have intellectual discussions and debate the validity of a person's work or things like this, or philosophical discussions and whatnot. And we were around the table just having a jolly good time talking about all sorts of things, politics and stuff. And I found myself just relaxed and listening and talking French, and just, you know, I don't speak French fluently, but I was in there doing it. And Ariane she was a wonderful woman, and there's a beautiful story she told me after, in the last hour, and it was just us two. I asked her how did she get into selling books, you know, like the kind that she has. And she says, I'm going to shorten this story, but she says, when there's a bit of family connection, but she went to this market in Paris and she was tasked to buy and sell something. So the story goes, this is the shorthand, that she came across a book called Ulysses by James Joyce, a first edition one. She bought it for 5 francs, because it was francs at the time, not euros. And then she ended up selling her first book for 1,000 francs. And all the book dealers around her were laughing, because she didn't realize that she didn't even debate the price of the book with the person. She was like, oh, it's 1,000 francs. That's, you know, I bought it for 5 francs. It's now 5,000 francs. No, sorry, it's now 1,000 francs. And all the booksellers around were laughing, because they're like, you sold that book so underpriced. It's a first edition James Joyce Ulysses in English, and you sold it for 1,000 francs. It's probably worth like 10,000 francs and stuff. And anyway, she says that's one of the stories that got her into book selling, because with first editions, second editions, great works, you'll be surprised who's going to buy these books, you know. And it was just glorious. We were sitting around there, smoking cigarettes, drinking red wine. She kept bringing books out. She says, "Oh, you want to know about this type of French architecture? I have a book here, you know, and you know, do you want to know this?" Very knowledgeable, very clever, very witty person who could speak English, but I don't know if she speaks English well, because you got the impression every now and then that she could speak English, but we didn't speak English. We were speaking French, but she spoke French so clearly and so beautifully. Anyway, that was Madame Ariane Touzu. It was one of the most charming afternoons I've had on this entire trip, because it was so intellectual. I mean, we went off on so many tangents. Oh, Huysman, you know, and we're talking about the influences of this author and that author. And even if I haven't read them, I sort of knew about them. And then she told me about other people I didn't know about. And then in the end, I said, "Look, Ariane, you've been selling books your entire life. You're one of the most well-read persons in French. Here's my email. I want 50 French books written by French people that I must read." And that's kind of how we parted. And I'm so glad I came here. Gosh, I could camp here tonight, couldn't I? I seriously could. Oh, there's a little kitten. Hello. Anyway, that's it for today, I suppose. A lovely, charming encounter in a librairie in the middle of nowhere. To you guys, this is France. It's not the middle of nowhere, it's the middle of the world. Good night. Bonne nuit, mes amis. À prochaine. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and consider giving some money to my fundraising effort with St. Mungo's in aid to tackling homelessness. I have Instagram, Dominic de Bonhomie, and Folly in France, and if you go to my website you can find much more there, including an interactive map with my route and all the videos linked on the map. So join me next time for another little yomp in France.